Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. Playing fast 8th note lines on guitar is something that's of course quite difficult, and if you want to have an effective technique but also want to be able to play the lines with good phrasing, then there are some things that you want to think about when you're practicing and also when you're trying to play the lines. And that's what I want to cover and show you in this video. This is coming out of a question that I got from somebody in my Facebook group called Jazz Guitar Insiders. And this is Cristobal asking, "Hi, I'm having a gig next week and I have to play Donna Lee's Melody. I'm having trouble with my right hand technique. Do you have any advice to play that head without any trouble besides slow practice?" The main thing here is to solve problems by combining different techniques. So I'm going to take a look at the first few bars of Donna Lee, and then I'm going to go over some different ways that you can play it and use some different techniques and not just alternate picking that are going to really make it a lot easier for your right hand to play. Of course, this is going to get pretty detailed and pretty much about technique, just so you know. For me personally, I found that once I started really working with combining different techniques, I could improve my phrasing really a lot. When I was just using alternate picking, it was difficult to really get it to sound like a phrase and not just like a machine gun. And if you play only with legato, then you lose definition and you can't accent the right notes. So you want to find sort of a middle ground and use the right techniques for the right things at the right time. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, improve the way that you solo, check out some interesting chord voicings or arpeggios, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. If you're working on a bebop theme like Donna Lee or Anthropology or something like that, then I think the first thing you want to do is just take a look at it and then try and play it. Don't really worry about too many things, just try and see if you can play the phrases and see how far you get with that. I think the process that I'm going to cover here is mostly for those phrases that are causing you problems and where you want to have some other solutions and some other options. And most of it you probably want to just be able to play and practice a bit and then in that way get into your system without having to reinvent your technique altogether. The way I was just playing the theme is actually an example of how you shouldn't be playing the theme at all, especially when it comes to the triplets and the 16 notes. Because when it comes to bebop themes, then 16 notes and triplets are usually mostly used as embellishments of the melody, and you want to execute them in a way that works with that. So I played the first triplet as, and that's just way too clear. You probably want to slur some of that a bit. I think this is coming out of how horn players would phrase this, and they would slur a phrase like that, so you could better play it with some sort of legato. In this case, I think the obvious choice is to play it with a hammer-on pull-off, so like this. And it sounds a lot less choppy. And in general, the problem with playing this with alternate picking is just that it's going to get too choppy. So that's also the problem when we get to the next part of it. So this is also easier to just do with legato technique, so like this, and sounds better than, because again, it's too clear, it's too choppy, it doesn't really sound like a musical phrase in that way. Now the core technique that I rely on, and that I think you should rely on as well when you're trying to play themes like this, is alternate picking. I find that to be by far the most versatile way of playing guitar and playing melodies on guitar with a pick anyway. In this video I'm going to talk about how to mix that up with legato and also with economy picking, because both of those are really useful if you want to make the life for your right hand a little bit easier. So I'm mostly going to talk about how you can use different techniques, especially for your right hand, to execute a set way of playing this melody. And then at the end of the video I'm also going to talk a little bit about what happens once we start moving around the notes, because of course you can also get a lot done by just playing it on a different part of the neck. A few strategic ways of using legato. What we're trying to achieve by using other techniques is that we want to make it easier for our right hand to execute the theme, because it's difficult to play all these notes with alternate picking. And the most difficult part of alternate picking is in fact to change strings. So if you're playing on one string, then this is not necessarily that difficult. As soon as you have to start playing stuff that's on different strings, then you're gonna get into trouble. But if you add legato to the equation, then you can actually make that a lot easier. And one way to do that is to just try and see if you can replace the last note that you pick on a string with a pull-off or a hammer-on, and in that way give your right hand some time to move to the next string. So in the first part of Donna Lee here, then one place where that will work really well is, first we have of course the triplet, and then the descending sort of chromatic run from F to E flat. And here I can choose to pull off from the E to the E flat. So, and that's gonna sort of buy my right hand some time to go down and play the D flat here. So, and this also still works with the phrasing, because you have to be a little bit careful with which notes get an accent in jazz. But in this case, this note is on an offbeat and it's a chromatic passing note, so it's actually a candidate for an accent. And using legato like this, where I'm picking the E and then pulling off, is giving this note a natural accent, and that's actually good phrasing. Besides working on this inner theme like I'm doing now, you can of course also try and work a little bit on it when you're practicing scales. And I think the easiest way to do that is just to take a major scale. Now I'm playing 3 notes per string scales, which works really well for this, and then just play the scale and try to see if you can use legato and on the last part of each string. So that would be something like this. And then ascending. And notice that it does sound different from playing everything with alternate picking. But that's okay. We can actually use that to our advantage when we're phrasing, because if you use this difference in sound in a musical way, then it's actually helping you phrase better. Another type of legato that is also really useful to have in your system is slides. And a little bit later in this phrase, on the B flat 7, we have one place where that will work really well. If you play first the turn with hammer on pull off, then pick the E flat, slide down to the D, and that's kind of buying us some time to play the F with the right hand on the next string. Slides can be a little bit more difficult to fit into your lines and into your playing, mostly just because when you're using them, very often you end up changing position, and that may not be what you want to do. But there are really some quite famous phrases that work really well with slides, like these kind of Wes-like phrases, where I think he's using a slide to execute this movement. And I think they're very useful for that, and you want to have them in there as well. And it makes sense to also check them out and think about using them once in a while. Economy picking your way out of trouble spots. Another way to deal with some of the difficult spots when you're using alternate picking, and that's again the places where you're going from one string to the next, is to use economy picking, because that allows us to have one movement where we go from one string to the next, and that's something that's easier to speed up. It's a little bit more difficult to keep in time, but it is more efficient, and therefore it's also called economy picking. And that's a good way to work with some of those phrases, and that could sound like this. The way I'm using economy picking here is to try and see if I can keep the same direction when I'm changing strings. So I'm first playing the triplet, still using legato on that just sounds better. So that's played with a downstroke and then legato. Then the next, the F is up, down on the E, up on the E flat, and then I can use another upstroke on the D flat, and then down on the C, and then up on the B flat. And here I get a few upstrokes after each other. So first the B flat, then the A, and then the C, and then I have an E flat. I can play that as a downstroke. Up on the F, down on the G flat, and then an upstroke, and of course some legato on that turn, and then another downstroke on the E flat here, and then I get 2 consecutive upstrokes, so on the D and the F, and then up, down, and this is all just alternate picking. So what you can see here is that I'm using that in a few different places. There's no real system to it, it's just wherever it fits, which is really typical for the way that I use economy picking. I will use that without having to think too much about it, and it just happens to work in some places. That's kind of how it works out. You want to work on this in your scales just to get used to it, and you also just want to work on it in different phrases. I have a video where I'm going over some different economy picking ideas that I'll link to in a card in this video. If you want to practice this on a scale, then you can do a similar exercise as with legato. So just really try and play the scale and use economy picking. That could be something like this. So when I'm doing this, it's again 3 notes per string, because that works really well for this type of picking. It's really just alternate picking, but then whenever I want to change string, I've made it so that I'm on a downstroke on the last note, and I can play another downstroke here on the next string. And I think you can also hear that it's a different sound. Again, similar to the legato, it's a different sound than playing it alternate picking, where everything is a little bit more defined. Again, it is something that you have to use in a musical way, so you just have to judge how it sounds and whether that's going to work for how you want it to sound. The main reason that I can keep on publishing videos every week is that I have a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for their support, and it's because of them that I can keep on making all these very specific jazz guitar and music theory videos. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. If you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. Moving the notes around on the neck. Until now, I've of course taken the approach that we have one place that we're playing this melody, and then we can take different techniques and use different ways of making the life easier for our right hand when we're playing it in this place. But the guitar is also useful in the sense that playing a melody in one place of the neck is not the same as playing it somewhere else. So the notes are laid out differently, and that may make some things easier or more difficult if we start moving it around. So if you have a phrase that's causing you problems, then it makes sense to just check a little bit if there isn't a better way to play it someplace else. Maybe if you shift to the position above or below where you're playing right now. An example within this first phrase would be the A. So I'm playing it here because that's what I'm used to with positions. But this would work just as well, and then we would have this. And for some people that's gonna feel more natural and easier, so that's also something that you should then do of course. You don't have to play it here unless that feels more comfortable. If you want to check out another video where I'm talking about some of the different exercises and some of the different picking techniques that I use in my playing and also how I'm developing it, then check out this video. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and this is the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. And if you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next time.